This is Minding the Forest, a podcast of the Louisiana Forestry Association. Hello, I'm your host, Jeff Zeringue, media specialist for the LFA. In Minding the Forest, we talk about all things forestry. Forest landowners, loggers, and wood manufacturers such as lumber, paper, and pellet mills all play an important role in the conservation and management of forests for the important renewable natural resource it is. Managed forests offer more for wildlife and water protection, so the LFA advocates to keep forests as forests. This episode of Mind of the Forest is sponsored by First South Farm Credit. First South is your premier rural lender. With over 100 years financing timber and agriculture, they have the expertise you're looking for when financing rural property. If you're looking to purchase or refinance land, call your local First South Farm Credit office or find them online at firstsouthland.com. We have with us today Mr. Michael Lauve. Michael is the Vice President of Land for NativState and is a new and developing company that works with carbon storage and how that relates. So we're going to talk about carbon storage today and things of that nature. Michael, welcome. We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Michael, tell us a little bit about you first. Just kind of get to know you a little bit. You are from where?
So I'm originally from Monroe, Louisiana, born and raised. I currently live in Shreveport. My background is biology by degree. Graduated from Northeast Louisiana University in Monroe. And I spent the first 24 years with the company out of Tennessee in the specialty chemical business, all with the same company, servicing paper mills. And then my last 7 years, I was over water treatment for power plants for our company.
Okay. And so NativState is a new and up-and-coming company. Where is it based?
Our company's based out of Conway, Arkansas.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about carbon storage. It's sort of a new buzz phrase, if you will, a new service or product. How would you describe that?
So it is a new market, especially for the medium to small landowners. So developing carbon credits off of forest lands has been going on for over 15 years with a company called Blue Source that's been recently bought. Now it's called ANEW, very reputable company. However, they only will service or will work with large landowners, like let's say excess of 10,000 plus continuous forested acres. And what our founder, Stuart Allen, had done, he had bought some land. He's a petroleum engineer, and he had bought some land off the Arkansas River and decided he was familiar with the carbon markets, coming from the energy sector. His company was spending a lot of money buying these offsets, now called credits, carbon credits. Well, he wanted to put his forest in the program and develop carbon credits to generate a new revenue stream off that forest versus just harvesting the timber. He's an outdoorsman. He bought the property to raise his kids, duck hunting and deer hunting. Well, soon he realized the economics did not work to bring his 800 acres through the process. So he kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, put his oil and gas hat on and went and aggregated all of his neighbors and friends and family. So he's got brothers and his dad got land in it. So he aggregated, I guess it was about 15,000 acres in a general area and took that acreage through the process and realized the economics actually worked and essentially realized he just created a company and an avenue to this market that didn't previously exist to the regular landowner, to the 100-acre guy or the 5,000 acre guy. So that's kind of the foundation of this company. He got it started about 2.5-3 years ago. And we've got 7 projects going through the process with the American Carbon Registry. And that's kind of where we are today. We've gone from about 6 employees when I came on about 2 years ago. Now we're at 33 employees, most based out of Conway, Arkansas.
Let's talk a little bit about the terminology. You had mentioned that carbon offsets was once the term used, and now it's carbon credits. Explain to us really what that means.
So those terms are essentially kind of interchangeable. If you turn on the TV nowadays, about every other commercial, you hear companies having carbon neutral goals, and to get there, they buy carbon credits, where some people used to call carbon offsets. Now the industry is formally trying to make the terminology all toward carbon credits. Well, they buy these carbon credits to offset their emissions, and there's all kinds of carbon credits. There's technology credits. There's electric vehicle generate credits. And what we specialize in is improved forest management, generating credits off natural-based credits off of essentially trees and forest. We also do, afforestation. That's another way to generate credits, which you turn land that has not been in a forested state for more than 10 years. You can plant trees and develop a carbon program off that. So the nature-based credits is what we specialize in. And that's what these companies are purchasing in order to reach their carbon neutral goals you can go to any of these companies' sustainability report, and some of them have carbon neutral goals by 2030, 2040, 2050. And this is one mechanism on how they get there, is by purchasing these credits from these private small landowners to basically commit to sustainably managing their forest for the next 40 years. So that's kind of the biggest hurdle for these landowners that have these forests, is they need to be comfortable, because they are committing to that land being in a forested state for 40 years. So it is something to consider. And companies like us, we spend a lot of time on the front end helping that landowner ensure that this program is a good fit for that land and a good fit for that landowner's long-term goals of their property. So there's a lot of energy on the front end before the landowner commits to anything to make sure it is a good fit.
Now, when you say the commitment for 40 years, does that mean commitment to not harvest in 40 years, or it fits within normal forest management where you have the cycle of, I guess, a harvest through thinning, a harvest through a second thinning, and a harvest through a clear cut to replant all over again?
All of the above. So commercial harvests are allowed throughout the program. However, we work with the landowner and their consulting forester, if they have one, to manage the level of harvest. So one carbon credit is equal to 1 metric ton of carbon stored as CO2 or measured as CO2. So it all comes down to the biomass that's on that particular property. So in short answer, we just do not want to harvest more so than the growth rate of the forest, if that makes sense. Okay. So I guess on a macro level, for somebody that's actively participating in commercial harvest for obvious reasons, for timber revenue, a good estimation of what they can harvest over the first 20 years of the program is about 30% of the forest that was there on day one. That math comes out to about 1.5% per year, which your forest rate in this part of the world with this climate, this soil types, for the most part, that forest is going to outgrow 1.5 or grow faster than 1.5% per year. But we work with the landowner to clearly develop a management plan on the front end, just like I said earlier, just to make sure this is a good fit for what that landowner's goals are for the property. And we have timber companies, we have logging companies that are enrolled in the program, knowing that they're going to have to modify how they have historically managed their commercial harvest. But now they have two levers to pull for financial return, which is timber and carbon. So they have, just essentially gives them the ability to play the market. When timber prices are high, you cut more aggressive. When timber prices are low, you take advantage of the carbon revenue.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the combination of things, because I think there's sometimes the misconception that if you own forested land, then you must be wealthy, I guess, to put it very simply, and that isn't necessarily so. And in order to keep the forests healthy, you have to have that cycle of, the forest practice of burning, of course, and then harvesting in certain stages until you replant plant again. So I guess when you throw carbon storage into that mix of things, how do landowners respond to that? Do they understand it readily, or is it something they really have to kind of soak in and learn?
No, we have to soak in and learn it because, I would say conversations with landowners today are drastically different than they were a year ago because the buzzword of carbon, and there's so much interest out there and there's so much knowledge that's coming quickly. But we work with the landowners to help manage that process. This is a massive conservation project, is the way we look at it. And we're going to have wildlife biologists on board. The overall goal of this program is to manage that forest in the most sustainably managed and what's best for the health of that forest and for the wildlife habitat in that forest. So we know that some of these forests, the best thing to do for it is to do a thinning, open up the canopy. And then when you're talking about pine versus hardwood, it's a whole nother management scheme. So we look at all those scenarios. It's a very dynamic process. But like I said, our foresters work with the landowners' foresters, and we just kind of clearly map all that out on the front end to make sure it's the best thing for the landowner, for their goals, for the health of that forest, and for the wildlife habitat associated with it.
What are some of the reactions that you get from landowners who may not understand right away what carbon credits mean and being able to have their land used in such a program? What are some of their reactions that you could share with us?
Well, we get a full range of reaction. We get some that are really skittish of the market to begin with, or the whole climate conversation. And then we get some completely opposite. They're just so excited to participate and generate a new revenue stream that previously didn't exist. So there's some landowners that got a little bit of taste of this market in the mid to late 2000s when what's called a Chicago Climate Exchange came out and tried to start basically what we're doing now. But that activity was a little bit ahead of its time. And what has changed since then is the market and the financial players like the BlackRocks of the world, the Canadian pension funds that control all of the capital in the U.S. They now require companies to have climate goals, such as carbon neutral goals or some type of climate agendas as part of their overall reaching platform of their company. That's what's different between now and the early 2000s when this market tried to take off. So when folks were involved in that, they're a little skittish now. But like I say, the conversation over the last 2 years has drastically changed, and it's been widely accepted by these landowners where it's a good fit.
But it still seems like there's some skepticism out there.
There is some skepticism.
Is that
like
because
I say,
of
we
how the early part of this whole market because it's a new market? When things start off new like this, sometimes there are some bumps in the road. Is that what's causing the skepticism?
That's right. It's really just an education thing and a messaging. So that's what really we're focusing on, just getting the truth out there, getting the facts out there, and making sure landowners understand the big picture goals of it. And really, it's all about conservation. It's all about managing that forest, and it's all about carbon storage, like we talked about at the very beginning. So a tree, just in general, the total weight of that tree sitting there, about 23% of it is straight carbon. So the whole premise of this program is around financially rewarding these landowners who agree to store as much or more carbon on their tract of land at the end of 40 years as there is today. So it's all about storing that carbon. If that carbon's not sitting there alive in that tree, it's released out to the atmosphere. It's one of the two, or there's potentially some wood products, sawmill. But all of that methodology is taken into account at the registry level. And that's another thing to clearly look at whenever a landowner's looking into a carbon program, whether it be us or some other companies out there, is to really understand the accreditation firm they are tied to. Our company has made the choice to tie ourselves to the American Carbon Registry, and that's a good place for information. It's acrcarbon.org. And their methodologies are globally renowned as the most strict and the most stringent, which in turn, that's what gives them the highest value in the marketplace. To these buyers that are spending a lot of money on these offsets, they want to make sure they are buying a validated, accredited offset. And so it is a little bit more strenuous for us in the land on the front end by tying ourselves to the American Carbon Registry, but it pays off in the end because like I said, there's American Carbon Registry, there's Verra Registry, there's a Climate Action Reserve, Gold Standard. These are all different types of registries that have different methodologies. And in turn, their credits are all worth different amounts in the marketplace.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of different things. One, the term climate change. That seems like there's, let's see, the best way to put it, I guess, would be it could be a political hot point. And folks might look at that as, oh, well, I see about this in the news, and they may be skeptical about the news reports and things of that nature. So that might seem to be a hurdle companies like yourself would have to get over. But that has to be included in the conversation, does it not?
Absolutely, it does. And you are 100% correct. So to address that, there's two things to address that. Once there is a compliance market, which is mandated by the government, such as the market in California or European Union, they're into the clients market where the government is mandating these companies participate in this program. And they're typically 100-year programs. In the U.S., we are participating in the voluntary carbon market. The government is not involved at all in what we are doing. These governments are voluntarily regulating themselves to essentially to keep the government out of their business for now. So that's number one. Number two, regardless of your opinion of the whole climate change and how much humans are affecting climate change and how much humans can improve, the climate, regardless of that, the basis of our program is all about conservation. At the end of the day, we're going to have 1.5 million acres conserved between Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas. It's all going to be developed for improved wildlife habitat, improved forest health. So at the end of the day, if that's all that occurs and the landowner receives a good bit of financial benefit from it, then so be it. So that's kind of the way I approach it. Doing the right thing for the environment, doing the right thing for the water systems, doing the right thing for the forest, doing the right things for the wildlife. To me, that's a good thing regardless of what it's tied to. It just so happens now that we've developed a financial return back to these landowners for being good stewards of the environment.
Well, that would seem to be a benefit in the cycle of keeping forests as forests. I mean, that's something that we say often at the Louisiana Forestry Association, that we want to help forest landowners to keep that land as forested area. It is a big deal to do that. And when markets are kind of difficult at times, they are looking for a way to earn the resources in order to keep that property as forest land. So it would seem as though the carbon credit market would be something that would be complementary to their normal forest management. Is that pretty accurate?
I think that's very accurate. And in addition to that, a co-benefit of this program, or several co-benefits of this program, are you're going to have access to registered foresters, wildlife biologists, going to have access to all of this expertise to help manage that forest. And that's just part of the program. We have to do that per the registry rules, but it's just a good benefit to these landowners that comes with the participating in the program.
Well, landowners do have a great advantage in Louisiana, I think, especially especially smaller landowners, in that the LSU Ag Center has extension agents that deal with forestry, and there's no charge to contact the LSU Ag Center and ask for a forest extension agent to come to your property and help you. The Department of Ag and Forestry, they have foresters and There's no charge to the smaller landowners to contact them and say, hey, look, I've got this acreage, kind of wondering what to do with it. And it sounds as though as if they would go that route, if they choose to go that route, they don't have a consulting forester just yet, they would be able to ask those questions as well. So they can find out, well, if I'm going to manage my forest land for wildlife because I want to see more deer, I want to see more turkeys, those types of things are certainly natural fits. And now what you're saying is carbon kind of fits along with that process because it doesn't really change the structure of what you want to do in order to keep that land as forest.
That's correct. I agree with you on that. And like I say, it's part of the process. And that's another thing that folks should investigate whenever they do investigate companies, whether it be us or somebody else, is how they manage that process. So we actually there's some companies that just do satellite reviews and satellite views of the property. We actually send foresters out there and set up plots, and we do a complete carbon inventory, which is essentially a very detailed timber cruise of that property on the front end. So we know exactly what's there, and we can sit down with that landowner and develop an improved forest management plan based on their goals for the property. Like you say, is their goals to have the healthiest deer, the most turkeys, or is their goal to generate the most timber revenue possible? We work with that landowner and can fit a program around whatever that landowner's goals are.
Do the age of the trees make a difference in when you're assessing how their land will fit within a program? Is the age of the forest something that's important to y'all?
It is important for two reasons. One, we need it to be a merchantable stand of timber. So basically a commercially harvestable stand to first qualify. And then once it's a commercially harvestable stand, then we go in and we measure all the biomass in that particular property down to the 10th of an inch. So back to the age part, essentially, yes, because it all comes back to biomass, the weight of the biomass on that property. So obviously, the older the tree is, the bigger it is, the more it weighs. So yes, and if bottomland hardwood is much easier fit to help the landowner determine if the program fits for their goals.
Why is that?
Once we get it, well, because of the way the harvest schedule on the hardwood. So pine plantations can be a little tricky, but we do all that work on the front end before the landowner enrolls to see if the program can fit in their harvest schedule, because once these pine trees get to a certain age, a certain diameter, they're no longer worth anything to the mill. So we model out all the different age classes and all of the property total. Let's say they may have 20% hardwood and some SMZs or some different areas of the property. Then they may have 300 or 400 acres of different various age classes of pine plantation. We can model out, and we do it, net present value, basically put economics on the table for that landowner, saying, okay, what's more economical for you? Is it to continue business as usual and be a true plantation tree farmer, clear cut, replant, or can we mold a carbon program around your current operation and generate two sources of revenue stream? So it's a little bit more tricky, a little bit more work on our end, not the landowner's end, on the front end to make sure that it is the right financial decision for that landowner. Now, these bottomland hardwood tracts, their highest and best use is typically going to be recreation. If that's the case, it's a lot easier for that landowner to realize, okay, this is a great fit, especially if it's on the unprotected side of the levee where it seasonally floods. That property is never going to be good use for row crop, a neighborhood subdivision, a golf course. So those are some of the things that we work with the landowner to make sure, if you got a good, beautiful 150 acre tract 10 miles south of Shreveport, we need to really think about this. Can you really say in 15 years that area is not going to be better suited to be a new subdivision development? Those are some of the things we help the landowner to really think out before they commit, because once what they're getting compensated for like I always tell people, we're not paying you for free, right? We're not giving you free money. You are agreeing to, and you are committing to, that's going to be a sustainably managed forest for a generation, for 40 years. So yes, you do get heavily compensated and generate a good revenue stream, but it's because you are committing to that property will be in a forested state for a while.
Let's talk about pine for a little bit. Uh, the pine trees that I'm committing to be in the program, I'm basically delaying harvest for longer, and it may cause the trees to get so large. There's no mill in my area that can handle that large of a tree. Is that something that really have to consider before committing to anything like this?
It is, and we map that out on the front end, so we ensure that we don't put that landowner in that position. So the way the new methodology with the registry right now is we can leave out all or half of H class 4 pine, which is 20 years and older. We can leave that out of the carbon producing acres, knowing that within 7 to 10 or however many years that area needs to be clear cut and replanted. So that's part of the modeling process we do. Like I say, on the front end, before the landowner enrolls in anything or commits to anything, we do our due diligence on the front end to make sure it is in the right, best economic interest of that landowner. And then that's why pine's a little bit more tricky than a typical selective cut process for hardwood tracts.
Who are the companies that are buying the carbon credits? I guess I use, well, first of all, am I using that term correctly? They're buying carbon credits. Is that correct?
That is correct. You name it, they're all buying these credits. So I guess it was 2 years ago, so it's probably a whole lot more now. There was 2,300 companies that have committed to carbon neutral goals by a certain year. So these are companies, and it's public information on their websites. It's companies like all the major oil and gas companies, the Exxons of the world, Delta Airlines, Walmart, trucking companies, Amazon, all of the companies out there, it's all the global companies, and even some regional U.S. companies. You can go on any of their websites and look at their annual report, and in the sustainability section, they are all stated in there some type of carbon neutral plan or some type of climate goal. And one component of that is buying these nature-based credits, which is what we're developing off of these forests. There's other kind of credits out there. Like I said, there's technology credits. There's billions of dollars going into new technologies trying to do what a tree is doing. Their direct air captures is one you can Google. That's basically pulling air out of the atmosphere, stripping out the CO2 and burying it underground. Well, it just so happens, as it stands right now, the most efficient technology in the world to do what we're talking about doing as far as pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing carbon is a tree. Eventually, maybe 20 years from now, maybe 40 years from now, technology is going to probably catch up and be as efficient or more efficient than a tree. But for the foreseeable future, these forests are the best mechanism out there to do what all these scientists are wanting to do, which is keep as much carbon on Earth as possible versus in the atmosphere.
So in solid objects such as wood, and I guess even when you consider carbon storage, even once the tree is harvested, it's still storing carbon. If it's used in building a home, you're storing carbon in that home and things of that nature.
That is correct. And all of that, what you just mentioned, and all of that is part of the methodologies, and all of that is part of the science and engineering and calculations at the registry level and at our chief engineer's level in Conway. All of that's accounted for in the calculation. So when we go out and we measure exactly how much biomass, and we know every tree is a different density. So every tree stores a different amount of carbon by weight because of the different density. And we take all of that into account. I think we monitor about 40 different tree species, and all of the math behind the scenes takes into account what's been going to the mill, what it's been used for, is it a table sitting in someone's house? Well, that carbon is still on Earth, right? So we take that into account. But if it's been in a forest fire or it's been used as for various other needs, basically the landowner gets credit for all of that.
Well, maybe it's too simplistic in the way I'm thinking about it, but any business or corporation that emits carbon dioxide in the natural production of whatever they make, is that most often what these companies are? Or I can't think of a business right now that does not emit something, if it's a manufacturer, if you will. But
well, I mean, even look at the United States Post Office or Amazon with all the trucks on the road.
Okay.
Delta Airlines flying airplanes. They're gonna burn kerosene or jet fuel. So these companies, in technology, these companies are doing a really, really good job of managing this the best they can as far as cutting their emissions down, cleaning up their operations. I know some oil and gas companies are doing a tremendous job stopping all the flaring, but there's only so much they can do. I mean, even a simple shop that really doesn't have any manufacturing, they still have employees that drive back and forth to the place of work every day. Unless they're driving in electric vehicles, they're burning fuel.
Well, even the making of electric vehicles uses a lot of emissions in the materials gathered in order to make that product.
Exactly.
Well, Michael Lauve, he is the Vice President of Land for NativState. We appreciate you taking time for us today. Is there anything that I have not yet asked you that maybe we want to let landowners know?
No, I think it was a good conversation, and I urge anybody to feel free to call me at any time. Our website's a good information. Like I said, the American Carbon Registry has some really good information, and I look forward to continuing the conversation and building on the relationship with you guys.
Thank you for listening to Minding the Forest, a podcast of the Louisiana Forestry Association. This episode of Minding the Forest was sponsored by First South Farm Credit. First South is your premier rural lender. With over 100 years financing timber and agriculture, they have the expertise you're looking for when financing rural property. If you're looking to purchase or refinance land, call your local First South Farm Credit office or find them online at firstsouthland.com. If you'd like to learn more about sustainable forestry and the LFA and its programs, and how you can be part of an organization that supports landowners, loggers, and wood manufacturers in the state, go to laforestry.com. You can also send comments and suggestions to me by email at jzeringue at laforestry.com. That's jzeringue at laforestry.com, or check out the show notes for our contact information. You can also subscribe or click the button to get notifications when a new episode is dropped each month. Remember, at the Louisiana Forestry Association, we're minding the forest for you.